Welcome to the Whispers and Footsteps, where mysteries brew and every detail matters. I'm thrilled to have you here. Whether you're a lifelong detective fiction fan or just love a good puzzle, you've found the right place. Before we dive into today's mystery, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you tuning in from? I'd love to see how far our curious community reaches. The Orchid Ledger. Nero Wolfe's brownstone runs on a schedule tighter than a banker's smile. The orchids get their hours, Wolfe gets his meals, Fritz gets his dignity. And I get to answer the door when someone with a problem bigger than his courage rings the bell at the wrong time. That's how Leonard Capel arrived. 10 minutes before lunch, hat in hand, collar damp, eyes working overtime like they were trying to find the exits. "I'm here to see Mr. Wolfe," he said. "Everybody is," I told him. "Come in before he decides he's not." Capel stepped inside and sat in the red leather chair opposite Wolfe's desk. He perched there stiffly, like a man borrowing furniture he didn't trust. Mid-40s, conservative gray suit, neatly pressed, shoes polished with the kind of care usually reserved for consciences. Wolfe regarded him without blinking. Massive, calm, deliberate. He didn't invite conversation. He allowed it. "My name is Leonard Capel," the man said. "I was advised that you handle discreet matters." Wolfe said nothing. "I'm being blackmailed." That got Wolfe's attention, though you'd need a microscope to see it. "Proceed," Wolfe said. Capel drew a breath. "Someone has contacted me repeatedly over the last 3 weeks. Letters, typed, no signature. They claim to possess a ledger, an old accounting book from a company I worked for years ago." "And this ledger," Wolfe said, "is damaging?" "Yes." "Illegally so?" "No. Nothing criminal, just personal." I leaned back against the desk and watched him talk. Men lying always explain too much or too little. Capel chose the latter. "They're demanding $5,000, he said. "Cash, instructions to follow." "And you have not complied," Wolfe said. "No." "Why?" Capel hesitated. His fingers tightened around his hat brim. "Because the letters stopped," he said. "Yesterday." That was the first thing he'd said that mattered. Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction wider. "You are concerned because the threat has ceased?" "Yes," Capel said quickly, "because it means they've learned something, or decided something." "About you?" Wolfe asked. "About the situation." I filed that away. People don't dodge words unless they're protecting something. "When did this ledger go missing?" Wolfe asked. 10 years ago. "And the events recorded in it?" Capel swallowed. "Involved a woman." "Living?" Wolfe asked. "No," Capel said. "She died years ago." Wolfe nodded once. That was all. "You waited 3 weeks to consult me," Wolfe said. "Why?" "I hoped it would stop," Capel said. "And now that it has, I'm afraid it won't stay that way." Wolfe regarded him silently for a long moment, then spoke. "Mr. Capel, I will consider your problem. Mr. Goodwin will contact you if I decide to act." Capel stood too quickly, relief and dread colliding on his face. He shook my hand like a man grateful for gravity. When he left, Wolfe turned to me. "This man," Wolfe said, "is omitting a critical fact." "Only one?" I asked. Wolfe closed his eyes. "Several." "Want me to find them?" "Yes," Wolfe said, discreetly. "Begin with the source of the ledger." "On it," I said. Lunch arrived. Wolfe ate. I watched him eat. That's how the house works. The phone rang the next morning while I was pouring coffee. Inspector Kramer's voice came through thick and satisfied. "Capel's dead, Archie." That froze the coffee mid-pour. "Fell out of his office window," Kramer said. 22 floors, suicide note in his pocket." I hung up and went to Wolfe. "He's dead," I said. "Kramer says suicide." Wolfe frowned faintly. "Blackmail," Wolfe said, "does not conclude with convenience." "So you think?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that Mr. Capel's problem has merely changed its form." I grabbed my jacket. "Where are you going?" Wolfe asked. "To find out who stopped writing letters," I said, "and why." Wolfe nodded once. "Observe everything," he said, "especially what appears insignificant." I smiled. "That's my specialty." As I stepped out into the Manhattan street, I had the uncomfortable certainty that Leonard Capel's fall wasn't the end of the case. It was the invitation. If Leonard Capel had jumped, he'd picked a lousy moment to grow a conscience. That was my first thought as I stood across the street from his office building, craning my neck like everyone else who heard the word fall and wanted to see where it landed. 22 floors up, the windows all looked the same, rectangles of indifference stacked neatly toward the sky. Somewhere behind one of them, a man had decided gravity was the cleanest answer available, or someone had decided it for him. Inspector Kramer spotted me before I could vanish into the crowd. "Wolfe send you?" he grunted. "He always does," I said. "Sometimes he even knows it." Kramer snorted and waved me past the uniform. The body was gone, chalk scrubbed away, but the air still carried that faint metallic tang the city never quite washes out. Death lingers longer than paperwork. "Capel left a note," Kramer said as we walked. "Short, apologetic, predictable." "Typed?" I asked. "No, handwritten." That interested me. "Anyone verify it's his?" I asked. "Secretary says yes," Kramer said. "Wife too." That interested me more. Upstairs, Capel's office was orderly to the point of obsession. Desk clean, papers aligned, no broken furniture, no overturned chair. A neat man right to the end, or someone wanted him to look that way. The secretary, Miss Dunning, sat rigid at her desk, eyes red but dry. She'd already cried. Now she was bracing. "Mr. Capel seemed troubled lately?" I asked. She nodded. "He stayed late, took calls in his office with the door closed." "Any visitors?" I asked. She hesitated. "Mrs. Capel," she said. "Last night." That landed with a soft thud. "How long was she here?" I asked. "About 20 minutes, Miss Dunning said. They argued." "Loudly?" I asked. "No," she said. "That's what scared me." I thanked her and made a note I couldn't write down. Quiet arguments end badly. Kramer showed me the window. No scuffs, no fingerprints worth arguing about. The sill was clean. "Jumped clean," Kramer said. "Plenty of room." "Too clean," I said. Kramer frowned. "You suggesting a shove?" "No," I said. "I'm suggesting persuasion." He gave me a look that said he didn't like philosophy before lunch. Outside, I called Wolfe from a payphone. "Capel didn't fall alone," I said. "His wife visited him last night. They argued quietly, and the office is cleaner than Wolfe's conscience." Wolfe was silent for a moment. "Did you examine the note?" he asked. "Not yet." "Do so," Wolfe said, and then proceed to the widow. Mrs. Capel lived in a tasteful apartment that smelled faintly of lilies and control. She wore black without looking theatrical. Her eyes were red, but precise. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "this is all terribly shocking." "That's what makes it popular," I said gently. "May I see the note?" She handed it over. Leonard's handwriting, neat, upright, restrained. Apologies, regrets, no specifics. "Did Leonard mention being frightened?" I asked. "Yes," she said promptly. "Of what?" I asked. She paused, just a beat too long. "Of himself," she said. I let that sit. "Did he mention Nero Wolfe?" I asked. "No," she said too quickly. That was my second quiet argument of the day. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe examined the note with reverence normally reserved for first editions. "This note," Wolfe said, "was composed under guidance." "Meaning?" I asked. "Meaning the writer was told what to say," Wolfe replied. "Or strongly encouraged." "So," I said, "someone didn't push him out the window." "No," Wolfe said. "They pushed him toward it." I poured myself a drink. "Where do we look next?" I asked. Wolfe folded his hands. "For the ledger," he said, "and for the person who wanted Mr. Capel silent rather than ruined." Outside, Manhattan roared on, indifferent and efficient. Somewhere in it, a ledger was walking around without legs, and someone was hoping we wouldn't notice. They were wrong. Nero Wolfe believes in preparation the way other men believe in religion. Once he decides where a fact belongs, he expects it to behave. Unfortunately for Leonard Capel, and now for us, facts don't stay put when somebody starts rearranging the shelves. Wolfe's instruction was simple. Find the ledger. That narrowed my field to about half of Manhattan and most of its moral failures. Capel's old company, Mercer Maritime Logistics, had folded 8 years ago with the quiet efficiency of a well-planned funeral. No scandal, no headlines, just a polite dissolution and a lot of men pretending the past didn't exist. I started with Gerald Fenton. Fenton had been a senior partner back when Mercer Maritime still floated. These days, he ran a consulting firm in Midtown that specialized in explaining disasters after they'd already happened. His office was glass and steel, modern, impersonal, and scrubbed of anything that might suggest regret. He greeted me with a practiced smile. "Archie Goodwin," he said. "I was wondering when Wolfe would send you." "That makes one of us," I said. "I'm looking for an old ledger." Fenton's smile flickered, just a twitch barely visible. "Enough." "Mr. Capel mentioned one," I continued, "before he died." "That's unfortunate," Fenton said smoothly, "but I know nothing about any ledger." "You're sure?" I asked. 10 years is a long time to forget numbers." "I remember only what matters," he said. "That's funny," I said. "So do blackmailers." His eyes hardened. I'm suggesting you remember exactly where you were when Mercer Maritime went under." Fenton leaned back. "We all lost something," he said. "Some of us lost more." I left him chewing on that. Next stop was Paul Renwick, the former auditor Elaine Mercer had mentioned. Renwick lived in a narrow apartment on the Upper West Side that smelled like old books and reheated coffee. He answered the door in his shirt sleeves, tie loosened, nerves fully engaged. "I knew this would happen," he said before I spoke. "That makes two of us again," I said. Renwick admitted he'd written the blackmail notes. No hesitation, no drama, just a tired confession from a man who'd carried it too long. "I needed leverage," he said. "Capel ruined my career. Quietly. Efficiently." "Did you have the ledger?" I asked. "No," Renwick said. "I thought someone else did. I guessed right, apparently." "Did you stop writing because Capel died?" I asked. Renwick shook his head. "I stopped before that." "Why?" "Because someone warned me off," he said. "That was new." "Who?" I asked. Renwick hesitated. "A woman." That made 3 women now connected to the ledger. 1 dead, 1 widowed, 1 nervous. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened without interruption, eyes closed, hands folded like he was weighing fruit. "Renwick is not our killer," Wolfe said finally. "He lacks the necessary restraint." "Meaning?" I asked. "Meaning," Wolfe said. "He would have enjoyed the blackmail too much." I reported Fenton's reaction. Wolfe nodded once. "Fear," Wolfe said, "is revealing when it's involuntary." "You think Fenton's scared?" I asked. "I think," Wolfe said, "he's afraid of being remembered." That left one obvious place to look: the company's records, or what remained of them. I spent the afternoon digging through storage facilities, warehouse basements, and the kind of offices where files go to die. That's when I found the locker in Queens, registered to Mercer Maritime, unpaid for 6 months. Inside were old desks, shipping manifests, and a steel filing cabinet with a new lock and fresh scratches. Someone had been there recently. The cabinet was empty. "Back home," I told Wolfe. "The ledger is mobile," Wolfe said, "which means it is being consulted." "By who?" I asked. Wolfe opened his eyes. "By someone," he said, "who needs certainty before acting again." I poured a drink and considered that. "Another death?" I asked. "Possibly," Wolfe said, "but more likely a confrontation." Outside, Manhattan kept moving. Somewhere in it, a ledger was still balancing accounts, and someone was getting closer to closing them. So were we. If the ledger was being consulted, then the dead woman attached to it was due for an encore. People don't keep records for nostalgia. They keep them because memory lies. Her name was Clara Vance. That's what the death certificate said anyway. Wolfe sent me after her because ghosts don't stay quiet unless someone keeps feeding them. Clara Vance had died 7 years earlier of pneumonia, which is the sort of cause that sounds tidy until you start asking questions. Her sister, Elaine Mercer, lived in a brownstone in Brooklyn that had seen better decades and worse tenants. She opened the door with a cigarette already burning and an expression that said she'd expected me eventually. "You Wolfe's man?" she asked. "That depends," I said. "Do you hate him already?" She smiled thinly. "Come in." Elaine Mercer was sharp-eyed, sharp-tongued, and held together by habits rather than hope. Gin glass on the table, ashtray full, curtains half drawn, like she didn't trust daylight to behave. "You're here about Clara," she said. "Among other things," I said. "She worked for Mercer Maritime." "She watched," Elaine said. "That was her job. Men talked. She listened." "Did she keep records?" I asked. Elaine laughed once. Clara kept everything. That landed solidly. She knew Capel, I asked. Yes, Elaine said. He was careful, polite, afraid of the wrong things. And Gerald Fenton, I asked. Her smile vanished. That one, she said, was afraid of nothing except exposure. Elaine told me Clara had kept a private ledger, numbers, dates, initials. Nothing explicit, but enough to make powerful men uneasy. When Mercer Maritime folded, Clara vanished quietly. 6 months later, she was dead. Did anyone ask about the ledger after her death? I asked. Elaine nodded. A woman came, elegant, calm, claimed she was settling Clara's affairs. Mrs. Capel, I said. Elaine didn't argue. She took a box, Elaine said it was personal. Did you see what was inside? I asked. Elaine shook her head. But Clara wouldn't have let it go unless she had a copy. That was a detail Wolfe would enjoy. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened intently. Mrs. Capel retrieved the ledger, Wolfe said, or believed she did. Meaning there could be more than one? I asked. Indeed, Wolfe said. People who fear records often underestimate duplication. I told him about Elaine's visitor. Wolfe nodded. This woman, Wolfe said, is systematic. She neutralizes threats in sequence. First Clara, I said, then Renwick, then Capel. Yes, Wolfe said, but she miscalculated. Where? I asked. She assumed, Wolfe said, that silence equaled control. That evening, Inspector Kramer paid us a visit, uninvited and unhappy. Capel's death is getting attention, he said. The widow's story has holes. Plural, I asked. She can't explain why she visited him, Kramer said, or why the note reads like it was dictated. Wolfe folded his hands. Inspector, he said, you will soon have cause to invite several people for questioning. Kramer squinted. Including the widow. Especially the widow, Wolfe said. After Kramer left, Wolfe turned to me. Mr. Goodwin, he said, we must compel movement. From who? I asked. From all of them, Wolfe replied. The ledger must be produced. Whoever holds it will attempt to secure final advantage. So we wait? I asked. No, Wolfe said. We arrange discomfort. That's Wolfe speak for stirring the pot until something floats. As I poured myself a drink, the pieces finally started lining up, not neatly, not yet, but close enough to feel the heat. The ledger wasn't just evidence, it was leverage, and whoever had it was running out of time. Nero Wolfe does not hurry. He applies pressure the way gravity works, slowly, inevitably, and without apology. By the time you notice it, you're already falling. His plan, if you could call it that, was simply to let everyone know that he knew something, not what, just enough. Wolfe instructed me to make 3 phone calls. First, to Gerald Fenton. I told him Wolfe had uncovered new information about Mercer Maritime's collapse and would appreciate his presence for a clarifying discussion. Second, to Paul Renwick. I mentioned the existence of a second ledger. Third, to Mrs. Capel. I told her Wolfe wished to return certain personal effects belonging to her late husband. None of them asked what time. That told me plenty. Fenton arrived first, impeccably dressed, jaw tight. He took a seat and crossed his legs like a man bracing for turbulence. Renwick came next, pale and sweating, eyes flicking between the furniture as if measuring escape routes. Mrs. Capel arrived last. She wore black again, carefully tailored, grief arranged like a costume that still fit. Wolfe watched them in silence. Fritz served beer. The ticking of the clock grew louder with each passing second. Thank you for coming, Wolfe said at last. I have not summoned you to accuse. Renwick exhaled audibly. I have summoned you, Wolfe continued, to observe. I leaned against the wall and observed right along with him. You are all, Wolfe said, connected by a document you believe to be unique. Mrs. Capel stiffened. Fenton's eyes narrowed. Renwick swallowed. The ledger, Wolfe said. You have each acted on assumptions regarding its location. Renwick spoke first. I never had it. That's correct, Wolfe said calmly. Fenton shifted. This is ridiculous, he said. There is no ledger. That, Wolfe said, is incorrect. Mrs. Capel said nothing. That was the loudest response in the room. Wolfe dismissed them after 10 minutes of polite discomfort. No accusations, no explanations, just enough uncertainty to keep them awake. After they left, I poured myself a drink. You rattled them, I said. Insufficiently, Wolfe replied. We require action. We got it the next morning. Elaine Mercer called me at 8:30. They broke into Clara's old storage unit, she said. Someone did, left it a mess. I relayed the message to Wolfe. Whoever holds the ledger, Wolfe said, now suspects duplication. Meaning panic, I said. Meaning mistakes, Wolfe corrected. I headed to the storage unit. Inside, boxes were overturned, files rifled through, and one thing was missing. A small lockbox Elaine remembered distinctly. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened. The lockbox, Wolfe said, contained Clara's copy. So now someone has both? I asked. Possibly, Wolfe said, or they believe they do. That evening, Inspector Kramer returned, annoyed and interested. Renwick tried to leave town, he said. Fenton called a lawyer, and Mrs. Capel closed 3 accounts. Wolfe nodded. Excellent, Kramer frowned. You enjoying this? I am enjoying, Wolfe said, the approach of inevitability. After Kramer left, Wolfe turned to me. Mr. Goodwin, he said, tomorrow evening we will have our answer. Because? I asked. Because, Wolfe said, someone will attempt to finalize matters. I considered the list. 3 suspects, 1 ledger, 1 dead man, and at least 1 person desperate to prevent a second. That night, as Manhattan hummed outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever thought they'd settled the books was about to discover Wolfe hated sloppy accounting, and he never forgave it. Nero Wolfe says impatience is the enemy of accuracy. He's right, of course, but impatience is also useful. It makes people act before they're ready, and that's when they leave fingerprints on their own thinking. The move came at 10 minutes past 9 that evening. The phone rang. I picked it up. Elaine Mercer's voice came through tight and breathless. She's here, Elaine said. The widow. She wants to see Clara's things again. That was fast. Too fast. Don't let her in, I said. I'll be there in 15. I grabbed my coat and was halfway to the door when Wolfe spoke. Mr. Goodwin, he said, you will take the police. Kramer won't like being dragged along, I said. He rarely likes anything, Wolfe replied. Nevertheless. Kramer arrived grudgingly but curious. We reached Elaine's brownstone to find Mrs. Capel standing stiffly on the stoop, gloved hands clasped, face composed to the point of rigidity. Mrs. Capel, I said, still settling affairs. She smiled thinly. There are matters that don't resolve themselves. Elaine opened the door. The air inside felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Mrs. Capel moved through the apartment with purpose, straight to the back room where Clara's belongings were stacked. She didn't look surprised when she saw the lockbox missing. That's unfortunate, she said softly. Is it? I asked. She turned. I hoped it would still be here. Why? Kramer asked. Mrs. Capel met his gaze evenly. Because my husband was tormented by secrets that should have stayed buried. And now? Kramer said. Now, she replied. I want them gone. That was when Elaine spoke. Clara made copies, she said. You didn't get everything. Mrs. Capel's composure cracked just for a second. Enough. Kramer watched it happen. So did I. Back at the brownstone later that night, Wolfe listened to the report without comment. She overreached, Wolfe said at last. She assumed control when none was necessary. So she's our killer? I asked. Wolfe raised a finger. Do not anticipate conclusions. Fine, I said. Then what was tonight? A rehearsal, Wolfe replied. The next morning, Renwick was found unconscious in his apartment. Sleeping pills, non-lethal. The ledger was not present, but the attempt was unmistakable. That makes 2 coerced silences, I said to Wolfe. Yes, Wolfe said, and one interrupted. Meaning? I asked. Meaning, Wolfe said, our antagonist is accelerating. Kramer came by shortly after, jaw set. Renwick won't talk, he said. Claims he doesn't know who drugged him. Of course, Wolfe said. He believes discretion may yet save him. Save him from what? Kramer demanded. Wolfe leaned back. From accounting. After Kramer left, Wolfe turned to me. Mr. Goodwin, it is time. For what? I asked. To end the ambiguity, Wolfe said. Summon them all, This evening. All of them, I asked. Yes, Wolfe said. Mrs. Capel, Fenton, Renwick, Elaine Mercer, Inspector Kramer. And you'll explain everything? I asked. Wolfe's eyes glinted. No, he said. I will observe reactions. That evening, as I made the calls, I felt the shape of the thing forming. Not the solution, not yet, but the outline of motive and method. Someone had mistaken control for certainty. Wolfe never did. And when he decided the books were ready to close, he always balanced every column, right down to the last human cost. When Nero Wolfe asks people to come to his office, they come. Some arrive confident, some arrive frightened, none arrive ignorant. They all know something is about to happen, even if they don't know what. That evening, the brownstone felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. Gerald Fenton arrived first, punctual and polished, wearing a look that said he'd already rehearsed his denials. He chose a chair farthest from Wolfe's desk, crossed his legs, and clasped his hands as if holding them still required effort. Paul Renwick came next, pale and thinner than before, his eyes shadowed by the knowledge that someone had tried, unsuccessfully, to shut him up. He avoided everyone's gaze and sat near the door, a man measuring distances. Elaine Mercer followed, coat still on, expression sharp and guarded. She took the seat nearest the window, posture rigid, cigarette unlit but present, like a promise. Mrs. Capel arrived last. She wore black again, but this time it looked less like mourning and more like armor. She met my eyes briefly, then Wolfe's, and took the remaining chair without a word. Inspector Kramer stood near the door, arms folded, face set in professional neutrality. Fritz brought beer and withdrew. The clock ticked. Wolfe waited. Silence does things to people. It makes them adjust their posture, clear their throats, reconsider what they plan to say. Wolfe let it work. At present, Wolfe said finally, you are all united by fear. Renwick flinched. Fenton stiffened. Mrs. Capel didn't move. You fear, Wolfe continued, exposure, prosecution, humiliation, or survival. Each of you differently. Yet all have acted on the same assumption. Fenton spoke sharply. This is absurd. Indeed, Wolfe said calmly. Absurdity is often the byproduct of panic. He turned his gaze to Mrs. Capel. Madam, Wolfe said, you believe the ledger to be singular. Her lips pressed together. Elaine leaned forward. Clara never trusted singular solutions. Wolfe nodded. Miss Mercer's correct. There were copies. At least 2. Renwick looked up sharply. Then I wasn't. You were never in possession, Wolfe said. You were merely convenient. Renwick slumped back, breathing hard. Wolfe shifted his attention to Fenton. You, sir, Wolfe said, feared the ledger not for what it proved, but for what it implied. You feared context. Fenton opened his mouth, then closed it. Wolfe's gaze moved again, back to Mrs. Capel. You, Wolfe said, sought to eliminate variables. First Clara Vance, then Paul Renwick, then your husband. Mrs. Capel's voice was steady. You accuse me of murder? I accuse no one, Wolfe said, not yet. Kramer shifted his weight. Wolfe continued, your error, madam, was assuming that persuasion leaves no residue. She looked at him then. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw something flicker behind the control. Calculation, anger, fear. Leonard was weak, she said quietly. He couldn't live with what he'd done. On the contrary, Wolfe said, he lived with it for 10 years. He died when you forced him to confront it. The room tightened. Wolfe folded his hands. There is one matter unresolved, he said, the location of the ledger. Every eye in the room shifted, some too quickly, some too late. That, Wolfe said, will be addressed shortly. He turned to me. Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe said, please escort our guest to remain. I understood. Nobody was leaving. Kramer nodded grimly. Wolfe leaned back satisfied, but not finished. Tomorrow, he said, I will explain everything. Tonight you will contemplate the consequences of miscalculation. The clock ticked louder. No one spoke. Outside, Manhattan kept moving, unaware that in a quiet brownstone, the books were about to close, and one name was about to be written in permanent ink. Nero Wolfe waited until the room had exhausted its silence. That takes patience. He has it. The chairs were occupied, the doors closed, and the tension tight enough to tune a violin. Inspector Kramer stood with his notebook ready, pretending this was just another evening. It wasn't. He knew it. We all did. Wolfe cleared his throat. This case, he said, has been persistently misunderstood as one of violence. It is not. It is one of control. Mrs. Capel did not look away. She sat upright, hands folded, mourning worn like an accessory she could remove when necessary. Leonard Capel did not jump, Wolfe continued, nor was he pushed. He was convinced. Kramer raised an eyebrow. You're saying persuasion is murder. I am saying, Wolfe replied evenly, that coercion can be lethal when properly applied. Wolfe gestured toward the desk. The ledger in question originated with Clara Vance. She kept records not of crimes, but of weaknesses. Payments, favors, private arrangements. Such documents are not illegal. They are merely intolerable. Elaine Mercer nodded once. Renwick stared at the floor. When Mercer Maritime dissolved, Wolfe went on, Clara retained her ledger. Mrs. Capel, recognizing its danger, retrieved what she believed to be the only copy. Mrs. Capel's fingers tightened. She was mistaken, Wolfe said. Clara made duplicates. One was concealed. One was shared. Shared with who? Kramer demanded. With Paul Renwick, Wolfe said. Not intentionally, he discovered references to himself and inferred the rest. Renwick flinched. I never had it, he said. Correct, Wolfe replied. You never possessed it, but you believed someone else did, and that belief motivated your blackmail. Wolfe shifted his gaze. Gerald Fenton, he said. You feared exposure most of all, not because of what the ledger proved, but because it reminded others where to look. Fenton's face had gone pale. Mrs. Capel, Wolfe continued, recognized that fear is effective only while uncertain. She therefore sought to remove uncertainty. Elaine spoke sharply. You mean silence? Precisely, Wolfe said. He ticked off the sequence calmly. First, Clara Vance. Her death, though attributed to illness, followed a period of intense stress and medical interference, not provable now, but sufficient to remove the originator. Mrs. Capel inhaled sharply. Wolfe continued without pause. Second, Paul Renwick, an attempted overdose, non-lethal, a warning. Renwick nodded, trembling. Finally, Wolfe said, Leonard Capel. The room went still. Mrs. Capel visited her husband the evening before his death, Wolfe said. She confronted him with the certainty that the ledger would surface. She offered him two options, exposure or escape. That's absurd, Mrs. Capel said coldly. Leonard was a grown man. Yes, Wolfe agreed, and deeply susceptible to shame. Wolfe leaned forward. The suicide note was dictated. The language is formal, impersonal, carefully absolving others. It reflects instruction, not impulse. Kramer scribbled furiously. You created, Wolfe said, a situation in which Leonard believed death was the only way to protect you. Mrs. Capel's voice was quiet. He chose. Choice under coercion, Wolfe said, is no choice at all. Wolfe paused. The final error, he said, was assuming the ledger itself was decisive. He nodded toward me. Mr. Goodwin. I crossed to the side table and lifted a modest orchid pot. I tipped it gently. A false bottom slid loose. Inside lay the ledger. Mrs. Capel closed her eyes. You see, Wolfe said calmly, documents are durable, but patterns are indelible. You underestimated duplication, you underestimated witnesses, and you underestimated me. Kramer straightened. Mrs. Capel, you're under arrest for the murder of Leonard Capel. She did not resist. As they led her away, she spoke once, quietly. I only wanted it finished. Wolfe nodded. So do I. The door closed. The house exhaled. Elaine Mercer stood slowly. Clara would have liked this, she said. Yes, Wolfe replied. She valued accuracy. After everyone left, Wolfe returned to his orchids. I poured a drink. Nice work, I said. Wolfe grunted, which in his language meant case closed. Outside, Manhattan kept moving. Inside, the ledger was silent at last, and for once, the books balanced.